Biker punches 85-year-old veteran. Then his son shows up with a strike team. He survived a war, but not a trip to the gas station. It was a quiet morning in a small town in Texas. 85-year-old James Pops Harris, a proud black veteran who had served in the Korean War, pulled up to a local gas station in his old pickup truck. Known and loved in the community, Pops was just grabbing a coffee and chatting with the cashier like he did every morning. But this day would change his life and the town's peace forever. Out of nowhere, a loud motorcycle roared into the lot. The biker, a heavily tattooed man in his 30s, was clearly angry. Witnesses say he seemed to be looking for trouble. He entered the store, bumped into Pops, and shouted, "Watch where you're going, old man." Pops, a calm and collected elderly veteran known in the neighborhood for his kindness and wisdom, didn't flinch. He looked the younger man in the eye and replied firmly, "Son, respect your elders." What happened next shocked everyone. Without warning, the biker punched Pops square in the face. The blow was brutal. Pops fell hard to the floor, his head striking the tile with a sickening thud. A hush fell over the store for a heartbeat, and then chaos erupted. Staff and several customers rushed to help Pops. One woman screamed for someone to call 911. Another yelled at the biker, who only smirked, turned around, and strutted out as if he owned the world. He revved his engine, adrenaline pumping, convinced he'd just proved how tough he was. What he didn't know was that Pops wasn't just any old man. He was a decorated Marine with a tight-knit group of veteran friends who still looked out for each other. One of them, a quiet man named Reggie, happened to be filling up his truck just a few pumps over. He saw everything. Without hesitation, he got on his phone, made a call, and said only, "It's time." Before the biker could leave the lot, 3 trucks boxed him in. Veterans, men and women, stepped out. Calm, disciplined, and furious. The biker finally realized he hadn't picked a fight with a frail old man. He'd disrespected a brotherhood that never left their own behind. And now there would be consequences. You messed with the wrong man's father. As Pops was helped by gas station staff and concerned customers, someone dialed 911, relaying the brutal assault to emergency services. But one brave young woman who had witnessed everything from the moment the biker stomped in made a second call. Her hands trembled as she dialed a number she'd only used once before, but she knew it was time. She wasn't just calling anyone. She was calling Marcus Harris, Pops' son. Marcus wasn't your average man. He was a former Special Forces commander, a decorated war hero who had served in some of the most dangerous regions on Earth. After retiring from the military, he had founded and now led a private military security team, an elite unit that trained first responders, VIP protection agents, and counterterrorism forces around the globe. The kind of team that didn't just react to danger. They neutralized it with precision. When Marcus answered the call, he was in the middle of a training session with his team. He listened silently as the young woman recounted what happened, how his father had been punched in the face without warning and left unconscious on the gas station floor. For a moment, there was nothing but silence on the line. Then came a single, ice-cold question. "Where is he now?" The woman responded quickly, her voice still shaking. "He just left. I got a photo of his license plate. He's on a black Harley plate number 5X9GHT. That was all Marcus needed." He ended the call, slowly turned to his team, and said in a calm, steely voice, "Suit up. We've got a situation." The room fell silent. Every man and woman there knew what that tone meant. They dropped what they were doing and began gearing up. Tactical vests, earpieces, gear bags. Within minutes, they were ready to roll. Marcus wasn't just angry, he was focused. His face was unreadable, but inside, a storm brewed. This wasn't just about justice, this was personal. Pops had taught him everything: how to shoot, how to lead, how to be a man of principle. And now some punk on a motorcycle had assaulted him like he was nothing? Not on Marcus's watch. "Bryce, you're on recon. Track that license plate, hit traffic cams, satellite feeds, whatever it takes. Lena, notify local PD and coordinate. We don't want to step on toes, but we're not waiting either. Darnell, you're with me. We roll in 5. Yes, sir, came the unanimous response. The black SUV pulled out of the facility like a bullet. Inside, Marcus sat silent, reviewing footage the witness had texted. He saw his father's calm reply, then the brutal punch. He paused the video, jaw clenched. This guy thinks he's tough, he muttered. Let's see how he handles trained operators. Meanwhile, the biker had no idea what was coming. He was heading out of town, still smirking at his own reflection in his side mirror. In his mind, it had been just another show of dominance. He'd proven a point, gotten his rush. No cops, no consequences. Just another day. But the consequences were already in motion. A trained unit was coming. They had his plate, a list of his known haunts, and a man leading them who wasn't just a former commander. He was a son who had been trained for war, and now someone had declared war on his family. And Marcus, he wasn't coming to talk. He was coming to send a message the biker would never forget. Technology, training, and justice on full throttle. Marcus and his strike team weren't just a group of tough guys with military backgrounds. These were elite operators, each with years of combat experience, fluent in tactics, strategy, and precision. Their strength wasn't just in muscle, it was in the cutting-edge tech they carried, the discipline they lived by, and the unspoken code they followed. Protect what matters. Deliver justice. Within 10 minutes of getting the biker's license plate, the team had tapped into a full-spectrum pursuit. Bryce, their recon specialist, hacked into public traffic cams with surgical speed, using facial recognition to confirm the biker's identity. Darnell ran the plate and cross-referenced it with DMV records, and Lena coordinated with a contact at the sheriff's office to avoid red tape. The biker had a rap sheet, bar fights, reckless driving, assault. Nothing serious enough to put him away, but enough to paint the picture. This wasn't his first act of violence, but this time, he'd picked the wrong target. The footage showed him weaving through back roads, eventually pulling into a run-down biker bar just outside of town. The Rusty Nail, a known watering hole for rough types and ex-cons. It was the kind of place where nobody asked questions, and nobody called the cops. Marcus's team didn't hesitate. Their SUV, black respect, isn't given because of age. It's earned by character, and Pops had plenty. When the dust settled, and the dusting of tension in the Rusty Nail faded, Pops's injuries turned out to be minor. He'd been bruised, shaken, and exhausted, but his pride, his spirit, remained unbroken. The veteran had always been a man of calm resilience, never one to show weakness even in the face of his own physical limitations. Despite his age, he carried himself like a man who had seen it all, fought it all, and come out stronger. When asked about the incident, Pops offered a humble grin, his face lighting up despite the residual pain. "I fought for a country where things like this shouldn't happen," he said, his voice steady. "But I'm glad my son fought back with brains, not bullets." There it was. Proof of the depth of Pops's character. He wasn't angry. He wasn't looking for revenge. He had lived through enough real battles to understand that violence wasn't the answer, no matter how justified it seemed, and his son had understood that lesson perfectly. Marcus had chosen the path of intelligence, of strategy, of calculated, methodical action over brute force. He didn't need to punch the biker to make his point. He let the law and the undeniable evidence do the work for him. It was a lesson in justice that few would forget. The biker, on the other hand, was not so lucky. The next morning, thanks to the tireless work of Marcus and his team, the biker was arrested. The evidence they had compiled, photos, videos, witness statements, and legal filings, was airtight. There was no way for the biker to wriggle out of it. He was facing multiple charges, from aggravated assault and elder abuse to a civil lawsuit and prosecution under the Veterans Protection Act. The biker had made a critical mistake. He'd underestimated Pops, and worse, he'd underestimated Marcus. The case quickly went viral, making headlines across the country. News outlets picked up the story, but it wasn't the violence that grabbed attention. It was the way Marcus handled the situation. The internet buzzed with discussions about the true meaning of respect, veterans' rights, and the power of peaceful justice. Social media exploded with hashtags like Respect the Heroes, Veterans First, and Justice Not Vengeance. People shared the story of the biker who thought he could get away with assaulting an old man, only to realize that the consequences were far greater than he'd ever imagined. But more than that, the story sparked a larger conversation about the kind of society we want to live in. How far are we willing to let disrespect slide? How much should we tolerate before we step in and do something about it? In a world where things often seem to be spiraling out of control, this story reminded people that there are still lines that should never be crossed. That respect, honor, and justice, true justice, should never be optional. And while some may have expected the biker to face a simple punishment, this was more than just a legal matter. It was a reminder that actions have consequences, whether you're a seasoned soldier or a young punk looking for trouble. Marcus had set the example. He had taken the high road. Instead of using violence, he used intelligence. He used strategy. And most importantly, he used his connection to his father, a man who had seen war and understood the price of true sacrifice, to remind the world that some things are worth fighting for, and some things can't be ignored. This story wasn't about revenge. It was about honor. It was about respect, character, and the way one man's actions changed everything. Marcus, by choosing to use his brain over his fists, showed that true power comes not from what you can destroy, but from what you can protect, and how you can protect it. And perhaps the most profound lesson from this story was the realization that you never know who someone is connected to. You never know who's watching, who's listening, or who's willing to stand up for what's right. The biker had crossed the line, but what he hadn't counted on was that Pops had a son who wasn't afraid to defend him, not with violence, but with a quiet, unshakable sense of justice. You never, ever disrespect a hero. In the weeks that followed, Pops became more than just a victim. He became a symbol. At the gas station where the incident took place, the staff put up a framed photo of him in uniform, underneath a handmade sign that read, "Respect earned, honor deserved." Customers stopped by just to shake his hand or thank him. Some brought coffee. Others brought stories of their own fathers and grandfathers who had served, many of whom had long been forgotten by the world around them. Saturday. Mornings at the station became something special. Veterans from all branches started meeting there over donuts and coffee. They shared old war stories, talked about current events, and honored each other in the way only those who've worn the uniform can. Pops, always humble, called it the most unexpected silver lining I've ever seen. Schools invited Pops to speak. Community centers hosted panels about elder abuse, respect, and standing up for what's right. Even law enforcement credited Marcus's team for handling things in a way that avoided escalation, setting an example of how justice can be delivered with precision, not chaos. Marcus, true to form, remained in the background. He didn't seek praise, give interviews, or boast about what happened. When asked by a local reporter why he hadn't stepped into the public eye, his answer was simple. This wasn't about me. It was about my father, about honor, about doing what's right, even when no one's watching. But people were watching, and they were learning. The viral story sparked nationwide conversations. News outlets ran features titled "Honor Without Violence" and "The Quiet Power of a Son's Love." Social media overflowed with support, many writing that the story gave them hope in a world that too often rewards cruelty and forgets character. Even the biker's family came forward, ashamed of what had happened. His younger brother wrote Pops, a letter apologizing for the actions of his sibling, calling it a wake-up call our family needed. Meanwhile, the legal case proceeded swiftly. With the overwhelming evidence Marcus's team had gathered, there was little room for argument. The biker pled guilty, accepted responsibility, and received sentencing that included jail time, community service, and mandatory anger management, plus a requirement to speak to local schools about the consequences of violence and disrespect. And Pops? He just kept living his life, quietly, gratefully, and with that same steel in his spine that had carried him through combat, through fatherhood, and now through a new chapter of unexpected recognition. One afternoon, sitting beneath an old oak tree outside the VA center, Pops looked out over a group of kids playing on a nearby field. A reporter asked him what message he'd want them to carry forward. He smiled gently and said, "Simple. Know who you are, respect others, and never mistake silence for weakness." Because in a world quick to fight, it was a quiet man and his son who reminded everyone, sometimes the strongest stand is taken without lifting a fist, and sometimes justice wears no uniform, but carries the weight of honor. The lesson we learn from Pops and Marcus, 400 words. The story of Pops and his son Marcus offers more than just drama. It delivers a powerful lesson about respect, justice, and how we choose to respond when wronged. First, we learn that true strength doesn't always come through force. Marcus, a highly trained former Special Forces commander, had every skill to retaliate with violence. But instead, he chose restraint. He used intelligence, technology, and legal channels to make his point. In doing so, he reminded us that real power lies in discipline, not in aggression. This teaches us that acting out in anger may feel satisfying in the moment, but long-term justice is built through strategy, evidence, and calm leadership. Second, the story shows that respect is not just about age, it's about character. Pops was an elderly man, yes, but he was also a veteran who had dedicated his life to protecting the freedoms many take for granted. He had earned respect through his integrity, courage, and humility. His quiet dignity, even after being attacked, reveals that grace under pressure can be more powerful than any form of retaliation. Third, this story shines a light on the importance of standing up for what is right, even when it's not easy. The bystander who called Marcus, the witnesses, who gave statements, and the community that rallied around Pops all played a part in creating justice. It reminds us that silence helps no one. We all have a role to play in protecting the vulnerable. Finally, we're reminded that you never truly know who someone is, or who they're connected to. Judging someone based on how they look or their age can be a dangerous mistake. The biker thought he could intimidate an old man. What he didn't realize was that the man he assaulted had a son trained to bring down international threats, and who knew exactly how to bring justice without chaos. In the end, this story isn't about revenge. It's about honor, accountability, and choosing the high road when it matters most. It teaches us that we can defend those we love and uphold justice without becoming the enemy ourselves. And perhaps most importantly, it reminds us to respect every person, because behind every quiet soul may stand an entire army of truth. If you respect what Pops and Marcus stood for, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video. Let's keep spreading the message. Real strength comes from calm justice, not chaos.